Atrahasis, aware of this immense loss, gathered the wisest and most memorable survivors. "We must remember," he said in a great voice, "what has been lost."
We must tell the stories of the before the flood, the deeds of the gods, the wisdom of Oans, and the Apkallu. Only in this way can we prevent our heritage from vanishing into nothingness. Thus were born the first singers and narrators, custodian of the memory of the lost world. Their stories became a connecting thread between the past and the present, an oral tradition that kept the flame of knowledge alive. They told of the creation of the world, of the descent of kingship from heaven, of the building of great cities, and finally of the anger of Enlil and the great flood. Preserving knowledge became urgent. The memory of the written tablets became a legend, a lost treasure to be found. It was said that, before the flood, the wise, the descendants of Sippar had hidden important tablet archives, hoping that one day they would be found and delivered to humanity. The descendants of Atrahasis undertook journeys to search for these lost treasures, exploring the desolate lands and rummaging through the submerged ruins. The hope of finding even a fragment of the antediluvian wisdom pushed them to face unimaginable dangers and difficulties. The figure of Oans and the seven Apkallu took on a mythical, almost divine character. They were remembered as bearers of civilization, masters of every art and science. It was said that they had built the first cities and taught men to live in harmony with nature. Their disappearance during the flood was seen as an irreparable loss, but hope of their return, or of the rediscovery of their teachings, never completely died out. New communities arose, heirs of the antediluvian tradition but shaped by the catastrophic experience of the flood. Their laws and customs reflected the memory of destruction, with a greater emphasis on respect for the gods and moderation in behavior. The noise of humanity that had enraged Enlil became a constant warning, a reminder of the fragility of civilization in the face of divine wrath. In other regions of the world, also struck by cataclysms of similar proportions, stories of great floods and civilizing figures emerged from the mists of time. The traditions of Native Americans speak of torrential rains and a world overturned. In Egypt, the Sais priests conserved ancient archives that narrated the history of Atlantis, a powerful island destroyed by earthquakes and floods of extraordinary violence. The memory of a lost golden age, of an advanced civilization swept away by a cataclysm, it seemed to resonate in different cultures, a distant echo of a forgotten past. The figure of the phoenix, which is reborn from its ashes after consumed by fire, it became a powerful symbol of destruction and renewal, an image of the cyclical nature of history and the hope of rebirth after catastrophe. In Babylon, long after the flood, kings like Nebuchadnezzar I would boast of being a
seed preserved from before the flood, emphasizing the continuity, however fragile, with the lost world. Assurbanipal, king of Assyria, boasted of knowing the art of Adapa, the wise, which is secret knowledge, and of deriving pleasure from writings on stone that predate the flood.
These statements reflected a deep desire to reconnect with the antediluvian heritage, to recover lost wisdom, and to rebuild a civilization worthy of its ancestors. The legend of the seven sages, the Apkallu, continued to evolve. It was said that, at the time of the flood, they were sent back to the depths of the Abzu with the order never to return. However, their wisdom and their endeavors remained alive in the collective memory, inspiring new generations of sages and artisans. It was said that other sages, of human descent, although in one case described as two-thirds Apkallu, would have taken their place, maintaining a certain continuity in the transmission of knowledge. The search for the books of Thoth in Egypt, sacred texts that were believed to contain the wisdom of In the primordial age, it reflected a similar aspiration to recover a lost heritage. It was narrated that these books had been written by the god of wisdom Thoth in person, according to the words of the Khan, sages, and that they had been hidden to be found in a future time. The reconstruction of the post-diluvian world was a slow and painful process. It required not only mastery of the techniques of survival and construction, but also the reconstruction of a social and spiritual order. The questions about the causes of the flood, the meaning of the destruction, and the way to avoid the fear of future catastrophes tormented the minds of the survivors. Some interpreted the flood as divine punishment for humanity's wickedness. Others saw it as a natural event, and yet catastrophic, which had marked the end of a cycle and the beginning of another. The need to interpret the past to understand the present and shape the future led to the birth of new cosmology and mythology. The figures of Atrahasis, or Noah in other traditions, became archetypes of the survivor, the righteous man who had been able to listen to the divine warning and preserve the seed of humanity. The legacy transformed by the flood was a mixture of loss and renewal. The memory of an advanced civilization lay submerged, but the lesson of its destruction had shaped a new humanity, more aware of its own fragility and the power of natural and divine forces. The search for lost knowledge, the transmission of memory, and the construction of a future more secure became the pillars of the new era, a living and dynamic heritage, constantly reinterpreted in light of the scars of the past. The mystery of the Guardians, beings that it was said had descended from heaven before the flood, and brought knowledge to humanity, it added another level of complexity to the antediluvian legacy. Their stories, handed down in the Book of Enoch. In other traditions, they spoke of an era of interaction between celestial beings and humans, an era of great knowledge but also of transgression. The memory of the Guardians, sometimes venerated as bearers of civilizations and other times condemned for their union with human women, continued to influence the beliefs and practices of post-diluvian cultures. The discovery of fragments of columnar basalt, the increasingly ancient datings at Gunung Padang, which suggested the existence of megalithic structures created by man long before the end of the last ice age, opened new perspectives on the depths and complexity of the antediluvian heritage, challenging traditional chronologies and suggesting the possibility of lost civilizations whose memory had been lost. Also the site of Baalbek. With its gigantic megalithic blocks, it raised questions about the engineering and knowledge of ancient peoples, perhaps predating historically attested civilizations, and testified to a legacy, technological in part, incomprehensible. The legacy of the flood was not only a story of destruction, but also of resilience and a tenacious will to rebuild and to remember. The generations following, they would have tried to make sense of the cataclysm, to honor the survivors, and to preserve the memory of the lost world, transforming the trauma into a lesson for the future. The water, which had brought to the destruction, it also became a symbol of purification and rebirth, a fundamental element in the cosmology and rituals of the new civilizations that emerged from its ashes. The ante-legacy, the flood, though transformed and fragmented, continued to live, a whisper in the wind that spoke of an age of gods, of sages, and of a world swallowed by the waters.